And my colleague Johanna is going to give some introductory words before we hand over to our presenter.
Yes. Thank you for the intro, Linda. I don't know how many of you have been around for the first day of our Data Literacy Week yesterday, but today is our second week of the Data Literacy Week. A week full of data literacy content at Stifterverband as well as Hochschulforum Digitalisierung, in which we have a lot of blog articles published, share a lot of social media content on data literacy, as well as have a wonderful hangout with Chantel. And I'm very, very happy to that she's here and that she got up so early. Sorry again for scheduling the meeting at 7 a.m. Your time. Anyways, maybe a few introductory words to the Data Literacy Education Program, which probably many of you know, and I already saw that some of our network members are also logged in, so maybe they're even the better experts. But we started this program about 1.5 years ago with 3 universities that were funded for the data literacy program. And we've been since then able to grow to a network of data literacy universities. I think 23 universities are part of right now, all working on wonderful programs and ideas on how to implement data literacy programs at their respective universities. And I'm very, maybe reading all the project proposals of all universities, it seems like there's one name that always came up and one paper that always came up. And that is the name of Chantel Ridsdale and the paper Strategies and Best Practices for Data Literacy Education, the Knowledge Synthesis Report. Seems like in every, almost every proposal of data literacy education programs here, this was widely quoted, and so I'm very, very happy that the author of this paper is here with us today, and will give us about 20-30 minute intro on that paper again, and some insights from that from her research around that paper, and we'll have an open floor for questions afterwards, which you're happy to type into the chat afterwards. And if there's no more open questions, I think I would like to hand over to you, Chantel, and maybe just give a very short intro on the Oceans Network and what you currently work on. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Joanna, for the kind words. So my name is Chantel Ridsdale. I graduated my Master's of Library and Information Studies in 2016 from Dalhousie University. And throughout my education there, I worked on this project with my supervisor, Mike Smith. So I am not a doctor. This is not my life's work. I just want to make clear that this is a knowledge synthesis, which means that I've collected all the information, and this is not my opinion. It's just the opinion of the experts that I had collected their works on. So, and also I've not worked on this since 2016. So I just want to moderate your expectations. I won't be able to give you any current information about data literacy, only about the paper that I've written. So this project was undertaken by a transdisciplinary team encompassing science, computer science, business, information management, arts, and social sciences and education. So there was a very wide range of experts involved. We conducted a systematic review to be comprehensive, including databases, gray literature, white papers, government reports, and policies. So a wide range of information, formal and informal. And I will not be speaking about the what so much, but rather the how to best and most effectively teach data literacy. So data is the natural resource of the knowledge-based economy, and without solid data to derive information from, knowledge and wisdom would be suspect at best. So we need to set ourselves up for good quality data in order to derive good information and knowledge. The 21st century is arguably data rich, but ideally we would like to become information and knowledge rich. Though it could also be argued that we are drowning in an ocean of data, and there are many challenges associated with managing it to use it efficiently, to derive the necessary information to gain the knowledge we need to make effective data-based decisions. So data literacy is the ability to collect, manage, evaluate, and apply data in a critical manner. So that last bit, in a critical manner, is the key to what data literacy is. The definition was created through synthesizing dozens of existing definitions using a word cloud tool, as you can see on the screen. You would be hard pressed to find a professional position today that does not include working with data in some way. Interviews, performing observations, working with key performance indicators, filling spreadsheets, reading charts, and so many more. There are a wide range of activities. And so all professionals today must have the competencies to work with data, and decision makers must have the knowledge to effectively understand and utilize it. Conceptually, data literacy requires critical thinking, gaining knowledge from abstraction and application of results. Data is by nature an abstraction and is only reusable if an individual can understand how it relates to the other information in the wider world. So the 21st century is very complex. There are 4 major themes that have been challenges across so far: citizens, thinking, problems, and skills. So globalization of the challenges facing the next century will involve multiple actors and will increasingly involve cross disciplines and sectors and borders. It's increasing importance for the everyday person to have the skills to distinguish between good and bad representations of data. There has been a shift in perspectives from learning facts to acquiring inquiry skills. These can be difficult to cultivate, but are necessary for success in the 21st century with data and an increasingly data-driven society. So, problem solving is no longer the act of making simple logical decisions. It has evolved into a series of complex issues, often with multiple layers. A knowledge-based economy requires people to be able to navigate difficult situations in diverse ways, which is challenging but critical to success. Computational thinking incorporates problem solving and critical thinking. It includes designing systems and understanding human behaviors, as well as encourages lifelong learning. There's been a significant increase in data. Data has grown exponentially in the last 7 to 8 years with our increased connectivity. It was estimated in 2012 that 90% of the world's data had come into existence in the previous 2 years, and we have shown no signs of slowing that down at all. So many people still don't have the ability to think critically about data that they are presented with, and so will likely never have the opportunity to interact with open data, let alone big data. Data literacy entails competencies that strengthen aptitudes and process complex cognitive problems, including the ability to analyze, create abstractions, and propose effective solutions to aid problems. In the US alone, at the time I wrote this report, it was predicted that by 2018 there would be a shortage of 140,000 to 190,000 data scientists and up to 1.5 million data savvy analysts and managers. And I believe that number was quite accurate. This was validated by industry when feedback on what skills were valued were overwhelmingly identified data-related skills. So the ability to ask the right questions, evaluate findings, and be critical of concepts, claims, and arguments is essential with the explosion of uncurated information perpetuated by the onset of Web 2.0. So as most of us, if not all of us, are familiar with the infographics floating around social media, it's important to recognize that that sort of thing is either done well or badly, or if it's just garbage. So knowledge of how to deal with data may be one of the most powerful weapons that professionals and everyone have. So the scope and quality and availability of resources is challenged to self-learners. Self-directed learning through trial and error often results in mechanics rather than concepts, which is falling short of the goal. Misunderstood, the benefits of data are wide-reaching but can't be achieved broadly if individuals in society are not capable of working with data. For open data or big data to be meaningful, citizens must be educated to not only in practical use of data, but on what benefits it provides personally and communally in order to engage them. There are a few courses offered back in 2016, despite the increasing importance and prevalence of research data management and data sharing. I must say I was very happy to hear that Germany has implemented at least 3 programs so far, so very happy to hear that my work had been used there. So the disparities, there is a misconception that those born in 1983, which are referred to as digital natives or the net generation, have inherent technological skills and abilities. It's pretty much like assuming that since we all wear cotton, we have a working knowledge of how raw cotton is processed. Not reasonable at all. So we still need to educate the new younger generation. Even though they're more familiar with technology, they don't understand inherently how that works and how to deal with data in productive ways. They think of it as a cellular plan data. The disparities, people in the workforce must seek knowledge and skills out independently, creating disparity in practice and breadth of knowledge attained, and frequently rank themselves higher in skill than they really are. There's a disparity between social, economic, and cultural backgrounds that must be addressed before the full potential of data can be realized, or else the data divide widens, because resources and skills are being distributed to people who already have access to them. Not everyone has access to a post-secondary education, and so we need to kind of broaden that application to public libraries and things like that people are relying on that don't have the resources to put themselves through a 4 or 5 year post undergraduate degree. So this must be a priority for government and should be done in collaboration with the education system to ensure consistent education across disciplines and institutions. So we used the top level verbs from the definition to create 23 competencies and 64 associated tasks and skills. These include a conceptual framework at the basis and going to data collection, data management, data evaluation, and data application. There are varying skill levels there. So the blue that I've shown is conceptual, the green is core, and the red is advanced. And if you can read that fairly easily, you can understand why we would include three different levels, because there's very, very different needs for different audiences, and depending on what the user is looking for. So I'll speak a little bit more later about the 64. So post-secondary institutions globally are being challenged to produce globally competitive graduates who work effectively in a knowledge-based economy. An effective avenue is to include data literacy education as a key component of national standards, which would incentivize the education system to develop these skills more diversely. Optimally, a standalone class in the first year of undergraduate education would be best, but who knows if that's attainable. So teaching early and post-secondary, that allows students to be more likely to learn lifelong skills and apply that throughout their educations. It would also benefit students to more easily integrate into the remaining disciplinary education, and also allows peers to work together in common problems at similar skill levels, so they're able to identify that early on in their education. Meta skills include adaptability, deep thinking, and being able to critically assess problems, all of which are highly transferable and lend to lifelong learning as well. Students must be taught effectively how to use technological tools. This doesn't mean instructing them how to use a particular program, but actually how to evaluate a tool critically and to identify and try functionalities. So to not be intimidated by a new program just because they've not used it before, but having the ability to click around and not be intimidated by the new and how to learn how to use something without being instructed explicitly. Communication between sectors as well as subjects and levels within academia are crucial to systematic and comprehensive data literacy education. Post-secondary institutions must cooperate with industry as well as the private sector to reassess and readjust curriculum in order to maintain relevancy. There must be as little misunderstanding as possible between what is being taught and what is needed in the actual workplace that we're getting our students ready for. Other levels of education were recommended in the literature, but we believe post-secondary education year one is optimal. So data literacy is increasingly offered at graduate levels, but affect only a small number of students and is more difficult to instill foundations, and they tend to be varying levels, skill levels, and very specific and discipline-specific skills. So standalone courses are not necessarily realistic right away, but with already full curricula with required classes. One large challenge to a standalone course includes instructors and professors not feeling sufficiently confident in their own ability to teach data literacy competencies, though the data librarians are a useful resource to bridge the gap if one is on campus. We could integrate into a complementary subject such as the research methods or information literacy class, but there are other literacies as well, like computational literacy, things like that, as mentioned before. So supplement in-class lessons with workshops, online courses, and/or modules to bridge the gap and provide targeted help focusing on building competencies successively, which instills students with a continuous approach to learning. So the workforce professionals already in the field would benefit from workshops that are targeted skills and domains. So project-based learning using real-world data engages individuals in higher order thinking, connects procedure to practice, and help bridge the gap between learning facts and acquiring skills, critical reasoning, argumentation, and communication. It helps students understand and participate in the data-driven decision-making process, and using non-traditional approaches such as formal and informal learning methods enforces the idea that students must be able to adapt to new challenges and innovate on the fly, preparing them better for the workforce. Starting from the beginning is especially important in learning a technical skill. Some might flourish, but likely most will feel defeated without prior knowledge to build upon iteratively. So we should provide students with tools outside of the classroom, such as tutorials and labs, to encourage independent use and practice on their own. The flipped classroom is an option for non-traditional practices. Instead of a lecture then apply, students learn theory at home and then apply in class. This allows students to recognize the relevance of the theory they are learning and identify their own knowledge deficiencies, making learning practical, not simply theoretical. Encourages students to find solutions because they're contributing to a larger community, not just a grade, and promotes task commitment, which is essential to learning technical skills successfully, as well as make connections to their own impact on society and provide solutions. Students learn best when this curriculum is relevant and builds on previously learned skills and knowledge, especially important when imparting technical skills. Project-based learning can connect multiple areas of the curriculum and relate to personal experiences as well as provide students with the knowledge of process that occur in the workplace and seeing it to completion. It also involves critical thinking and problem solving. One of the most important aspects of project-based learning is choice. Students are working on a project must be engaged in choice of topic and data to examine depth is an important component to this. So it might be easier for professors or instructors to provide students with a list of data sets that they must use, and that might be best, but we want to give them several to choose from several different types of studies in order to make sure that they're engaged throughout the whole process. also important to connect procedure and practice. Striking a balance is difficult, but the ability to work with data in diverse situations and having the ability to distinguish how to proceed appropriately is increasingly important in the competitiveness of graduates. Using real-world data and tools to analyze helps bridge between learning facts and acquiring skills. Using critical thinking to work through their processes appropriately allows for mistakes, which enhances the level and quality of their learning and long-term success. So our needs-based competency matrix provides a base for skill level and data literacy and could act as an effective reference for development of standards and assessment tools. But there are also existing ones such as American Library Association's Information and Literacy Competency Standards, OECD and CLA Plus programs to draw upon. So there are existing resources that can be drawn on at least. So students' skill levels tend to be varied and inconsistent, so it is important for pre-test and surveys to ensure that education is understandable and appropriate for everyone. Also allows for individual targeted help or change of pace in instruction if necessary. Post-tests and post-surveys provide feedback for improvement for future design and application, which is very useful. Assessment and evaluation validate whether instruction was effectively useful. Informal skills assessment is not as favored as practical assessment in this situation due to data literacy being a skill, not a simple knowledge. The competencies matrix, made up of 23 competencies and 64 related tasks and skills, which is in Appendix 1 of my paper, could be used to develop a self-assessment tool to help track success. So this is the 23, sorry, what did I put? 23 competencies, and it's just in a different format from the previous slide that I showed you with the arrows, but it just gives you a little bit of an easier way to view the sorts of things we've identified. So conceptual, intro sort of data tools, critical thinking, and it goes on to data discovery and collection, evaluating, quality, organization of the data and manipulation, basic analysis, interpretation, identifying problems, data visualization, presenting data, data-driven decision-making, citation, sharing, and then on a little bit more of a intensity is data conversion, metadata, data curation. So this is the sort of thing that people would take under for if they're trying to share their analysis on somebody else's data or their own data. So for further information, you can all look for the report online. I think if you just look for data literacy education, it'll pop right up. But dataliteracy.ca for more information. You feel free to email me if you have questions that you don't think of during the session at chantel.ridsdale@dal.ca. And I'll open the floor for some questions if anyone has any.
Thank you so much, Chantel. Thank you so much. There's already some or one question typed in the chat. Do you just want to read it yourself, or should we read it out for everyone? Maybe I can. Yeah. You mentioned that higher education institutions should cooperate with industry. Should they develop a systematic approach towards collecting information from the industry? If yes, what would be your suggestion?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
You mentioned that higher education institutions should cooperate with industry. Should they develop a systematic approach towards collecting information from the industry? If yes, what would be your suggestion?
It's critical that in post-secondary institutions that are looking to educate in data literacy should be working with the industry systematically, 100%. If I were to suggest an approach, maybe every 6 months or a year. Considering how quickly the data community is changing, I would suggest it more frequently than once a year, to make sure that these courses are hitting their goals and making sure that they are producing the future workers that these industry people are going to be hiring later. And it also helps with that information back and forth, that industry will also be better prepared about what type of quality graduates they would be receiving, at least data-wise and data literacy. So I think it's very beneficial to both. So I don't know, I would suggest maybe systematically every 6 months, or at the end of every academic year, like 8 months or something, or whatever works for you. But you don't necessarily need to do a robust German-wide systematic review of all industry, just some key people, and maybe mix it up every few consultations or something. You definitely have to work with them to see what their bandwidth is, to see what they would be willing to do. What's optimal for education might not be optimal for industry. So we need to work with them in collaboration and make it work for each of us.
I'm typing one of my questions, so someone else can go ahead.
I think there was a raised hand a couple minutes ago. So if anybody has any questions, I mean, you can also just ask a question if you don't want to type it. Okay, Johanna just asked another question. From your research, do you remember really best practice, outstanding examples of data literacy programs?
At the point in my research, I don't actually think that there were any existing post-secondary education programs for data literacy. This was all very new. We were kind of building it from the ground up. So yeah, just based on other people's suggestions, like all levels were definitely considered, but yeah, there was an So I would actually like to hear a little bit about the German programs that you guys had implemented, and how my paper had been influencing this. I'm curious because I know that Dalhousie, the school that I conducted this research at, they have implemented a class, but that's the only one that I'm familiar with, at least. So I'm curious. So you said there were 3 programs in German post-secondary education?
There's even more now. Like, we started out with funding 3 programs. I'm just scrolling to see if anyone from those universities online. And I know at least of 20 other universities, but even more, who started to implement specific data literacy programs. Some of them being funded through Stifterverband, some of them are being funded through other mechanisms. But I know that there's been just in the very few last years, there's been an immense movement towards like basic data literacy education programs, really targeting competencies described in your paper as well. But I don't know if some of, I mean, I know, I don't want to name anyone, but if there's anyone volunteering from I know that some of our network members are online. If anyone wishes to share from their programs, you're very welcome to unmute yourself and do so. I don't want to name anyone, so if you do feel like it, just go ahead. If not, it's also totally fine.
Do you know what level they're at? Like, it's post-secondary, but is it at first year, or does it vary between institutions? Or?
Varies widely. Also, what study backgrounds are being targeted, or what kind of programs it is being integrated into. Some of them address bachelor level, some of them master level, some of them even research data related, so more on the PhD level. It really varies a lot.
Okay.
We have a raised hand, so
that was me, so I'm raising it now. Thank you very much for that very informative talk. I love that paper. It's great to see the author behind that. It's always nice to see real people behind that published research. So thank you very much. I'm not a lucky member of one of the founded institutions, so I just give you my experience as a teacher, being involved in both the undergraduate and graduate level. We do masters. I just finished a course there. And I have a related question, though, because in Germany, at least that's my experience in my area in social sciences, that for accreditation, our research methods courses have to be focused on scientific research and less on data literacy, the way you described it. Even though there's more and more of a need to improve the data literacy per se, and not so much teach them research skills that they might use if they go on to get a PhD or a master's degree, but most of our students won't. So I'm trying to shift the content of my courses towards a data literacy focus. But here's the challenge for me, that the people who give us the accreditation, who focus on what kind of contents, what kind of methods do you teach your students, they still focus on what they know, and that is traditional, interviews that I know that 89% of my students will never conduct. They will not do a narrative interview as part of their social work daily activities, right? But I do want them to have the data literacy skills that you so well described. So in your experience, is there a way to accommodate both, or do I just continue to pretend I do traditional research methods, but I sneak in the data literacy elements?
Yeah, so I would thank you for being one of those drivers for data literacy education. That's great to hear. I think that this would be a potential situation where you would integrate it into the existing format of the course, but just get creative on how you do it. As long as they're getting the skills that your institutional accreditation people require them to have, they can still be supplemented. And just like you said, research methods, that's a course that is required for most masters. I imagine all masters actually. You can easily integrate data literacy education into the research data lifecycle, because there are definitely intersections where you can sneak things in and just bring a little bit more value to the current. Because I remember in my research methods class, it was all very intense, and so it was nice to have. It would have been nice to have a little bit of a background on how to actually collect the data appropriately, how to think about the question before, because it was all very rushed. I'm not sure if anyone else has had the same experience, but I think that research methods class would be a good place to be able to play with the integration.
You would like my course. The students actually say that's the best part, where they have to do real research during the course. Nice. So, and it's low level, and
that's fantastic to hear. Thank you for your question.
So are there any other questions? Jana has more questions. Do you want me to read it out for you, or do you just?
No, I can also. I find it easier to just type it to clear my my thoughts. You briefly mentioned the potential, I think, was on the last slide or so, for self-assessment tool development based on the competency network. Right? Yes.
Sorry. Yes.
You mentioned the potential for self-assessment tool development based on your competencies network. Not network, overview. Do you know any further work that has been done specifically on that, or what are your thoughts on the self-assessment aspect and like further?
I do not know of any current work that's being done in assessment evaluation for data literacy, but yeah, this project was more so about how to best teach it, not necessarily evaluate it.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. I'm not sure I'm able to answer that question.
No, don't worry about it. I know that your paper laid the groundwork for further thinking about the possibility of evaluation and assessment. But I find that it is always the next hot debated topic. Like, okay, how can we measure it?
Oh yeah, key performance indicators are big now.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe Joaquin can, yeah, he just put his hand up. I think he might have some idea.
I'm on my phone right now, so I cannot post the link, but there is, coming from the information literacy work that some US colleges have done and university consortia, they've also developed rubrics to test and evaluate data literacy as part of information literacy. So there's value rubrics, there is assessment tools readily available from a US perspective. It's very much geared towards the US, which is where I was trained, obviously, for my accent. But so it's kind of hard to really just take them. I translated some of them into German, so I if that's helpful, I could share that. But it's, yeah. I just sent the link, if that's okay, later to you guys, and I post the German version translation of the rubric, and so that's perhaps helpful.
Yeah, I think it would be. Thank you.
Thanks. So are there any further questions?
I hit all the points. I answered all the questions.
Well, that's a good thing.
7:30
Many people.
on.
Pardon?
7:30 in the morning, I was on.
Way to go.
I was actually maybe just, it's not data literacy specific, but if your paper was like one of the first addressing the issue, what was your research group's intensive of like, okay, now we need to write this paper and we need to do this research? Like taking a step back before that, maybe as on a personal note. Like,
what was our goal before we actually wrote the paper?
Yeah, how did you come up with the research question? How did you say, like, what was what drove you to say, okay, we need to do like groundwork on data literacy, or like a competency framework?
Okay, I wasn't actually involved in the proposal. I was just a really lucky research assistant that was chosen during my master's. My professor, Mike Smith, was the PI on it. So from what I understand, the conversations had between colleagues and between disciplines at Dalhousie, there was a wide breadth of knowledge and the expectation of students, what the expectations were. So as I'd mentioned, digital natives is something that people have been considering, that students coming in to post-secondary education more currently, they've been surrounded by technology and they are aware of data. And so there's this idea that they have inherent skills. And I think they wanted to recognize that that is not the case, because on the ground training them in post-secondary education, they're recognizing these gaps, and they wanted to find a way to bridge it in a systematic way, and not just say, well, you need to figure out how data works and how to work with data. That's not realistic. Disparities in education and learning, it's always better to get everybody on the same level if possible. So we wanted to see how experts had identified how to best do that. And so knowledge synthesis seemed to be the best way, considering it was such a new field in 2015. It was a very, in my methodological section of the paper, we went down rabbit holes. There were several different ways to reference data literacy, and if I hadn't gone down those rabbit holes, this paper wouldn't have come to even close to what we covered if I'd stuck to a certain keywords or discipline, or didn't have those experts from science, from computer science, from education, for their inputs to be able to kind of make sure that I'm not going down the wrong rabbit hole too far. So yeah, they were all very, very engaged in making sure that their students came out of post-secondary education as ready for success as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, somebody else raised their hand.
Yes, Uwe Schulze. So if you want to ask a question, just go ahead. You're muted.
So,
Yeah.
okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, Chantal. My name is Uwe. I'm from Frankfurt University, and I'm working in the field of geography teacher education. So I had a very quick look to your paper, and I found on page 5 that you highlight geospatial data literacy and GRS competencies against very general aspects of data literacy and data literacy education. Can you explain why do you think that geospatial data literacy and working with GRS technology is a more important field to be researched in the future, as you have written down on this, or as you have formulated it in your research paper?
I think that it's excuse me. I think that the reason that it came out that way is because of how the reports and the papers and the resources I had been collecting, GIS in this context was fairly new. And so it was one of those areas that I'm not sure if they recognize how best to integrate it into data literacy education, because it is a piece that should be understood generally, if not specifically, depending on what you're hoping to achieve. But I think I'm just trying to, there it is. Okay, so does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Maybe I need to repeat it.
Yeah, because I'm working in the field of geospatial education, and I, for example, know the geospatial technology competency model coming from the US, for example, and I know that they have a lot of sector-specific or industry-driven competency models across the ocean in the United States. And I was wondering why there is an highlight, or you said an highlight on this geospatial data literacy aspect. So whether you think it's a very important part of working with different kind of data or in the field of data literacy, or it's just one example of a whole bunch of different industry-driven aspects of working with data in different fields or in relation to different fields of education. So it's just the idea or the wondering why you highlight this geospatial data literacy in your report. You could also have mentioned, for example, data literacy in the field of medicine or biology or chemistry, for example, but no, it's especially geospatial data. And that's why I was wondering if there's a special reason why you did this.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was just because it was the papers that I had reviewed. More than one of them had specifically mentioned GIS in this context, and it's not necessarily that it's not necessary in the other fields or even important in the other fields, but there might have been evidence in the reports that those fields already recognize the importance of data literacy, and they had those skills, whereas GIS might not have back in 2014. 15, and that was a gap that would definitely benefited from being recognized by an expert that is not me.
Okay, so We have a raised hand, but we also have a question in the chat. So does your point relate to the question that was just asked, Mr. Rindstich, or is it a new point?
Yeah, I just went to it supports the answer that Chantel just gave.
Go ahead then.
I went to a conference in February for the Volkswagen Stiftung, and we talked about quality data. And in the social sciences, I'm a political scientist by training, but in the social sciences in general, GIS data and spatial data in general is considered more and more a basic competence that you need to involve in all sorts of research. So it becomes a standard, just like statistical analysis has become a standard in the 70s and 80s. So if you're a political scientist and you don't know anything about GIS and spatial data in an advanced field or research area, that's not good. I mean, you start to work with satellite data, you start to work with spatial data from mobile phones, from all different sources, and so it just becomes a standard. And so you obviously found that in the literature, and it's reflected in the practical and the ways that social science cannot function anymore without spatial data.
Okay, there's another question in the chat. Juliane Theis asked it, but first of all, she wants to thank you very much for your inspiring work. And then her question is, do you know about any best practices to motivate students to take data literacy classes?
Make it required. But short of that, just showing them the benefits, I guess. Just kind of drawing those conclusions about how they can use it in their everyday life, how they can improve their own community, that sort of thing. So getting the buy-in of other professors to kind of draw the parallels in their own courses, where you might appreciate this more depth if you did take that course that is not required but is highly recommended by most of our esteemed associates. So that sort of thing. If it's not required, just try to get the buy-in of your colleagues to encourage that to happen. That would be the easiest way. Otherwise, I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I hope that answers the question. Does anybody else have any questions or wants to make a point or comment? I don't see any raised hands. Okay, so I guess there's no more open questions.
Which means all questions have been answered. That's
But people are posting on the chat to thank you for your presentation and for the helpful insights. And well, I can only repeat that. Like, thank you very much for the great presentation and for all the interesting insights and for taking the time, especially this early in the morning.
It's almost supper time here now, so maybe that is one of the reasons why people have to leave here.
That's totally fair. Well, thank you very much for having me, and I've had this has been a wonderful session. I hope that that your data literacy week goes very well. Yeah, all online now, but I think it's going well. Yes, thank you so much for being part of it. My pleasure. Thanks for sharing. And thanks to everyone else for logging in and listening and being active participants to our Hangout. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and for taking the time, everybody.